we hear that Jesus' heart was moved with pity, and he began to teach the people many things. And he did that as a shepherd. His heart was moved with pity because he saw people coming to him hungry, people who were starved because nobody was leading them to God, people who were confused about the ordinary things of life, and they needed guidance, and there was no good shepherd for them. For us to understand this work of Jesus fully, we go back to the first reading, which today is taken from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 23. When you read it through the books of the prophets, you will recognize the fact that prophets pronounce or announce condemnation. But then, those pronouncements did not only end in condemnations, they also gave message of hope, an encouragement that God himself does not abandon his people. He never does that. If you read chapter 22 of Jeremiah, you will recognize that Jeremiah has just condemned the contemporary kings of Judah at that time, Jehoiakim and Zedekiah, who were the son and grandson of King Josiah, who was very holy and led his people in uprightness of heart. But Jehoiakim and Zedekiah were foolish, incapable of the office of a king, and they had become corrupt. They could not lead the people of God. And we hear what God says himself. Woe to you! I shall take care of you for your misdeeds. It is very important for us to recognize the roles of kings and rulers, whether they were religious leaders or they were political leaders. Their roles were like that of a shepherd. A good shepherd leads the sheep to green pasture, to safety. And therefore, a bad ruler is like a bad shepherd who will not protect his sheep. As I said, the condemnation is not the end, because there is always an encouragement. And in two ways, Jeremiah changes that condemnation into the promise God makes for his people. First, God himself will get involved. He will gather his flock himself, scattered all over the place. In other words, the people of Israel who has been taken into exile, into Babylon, surrounding nations, will come back to their home, where they will increase and multiply. Then Jeremiah was not only speaking for the immediate future, he proclaims what God intends to do for his people. A king from the line of David will be raised for the people. That king will be just, upright, full of wisdom. He will shepherd God's people. He will ensure that there is peace and justice on earth. We see this prophecy fulfilling in Jesus. Though Jesus does not establish a physical kingdom, but he will transform the hearts of people so that the kingdom of peace has begun to spread. As we see that it is because of that kingdom of peace that we are gathered. This kingdom shall last forever. Perhaps we need to take home something by making more sense about this very important reading. Religious leaders, political leaders today, they still exercise the role of the shepherd. But the point is, whether it's a religious leader, whether it's a political leader, whether the leader is leading people to green pasture or leading the sheep to green pasture, are the leaders bringing us to God or away from God, scattering us all over the place? Sometimes it is difficult for some people to understand the symbolism of the shepherd and the sheep. I will give you 3 pictures to meditate upon. Think of children or a household without parents. How does that look like? Imagine a school without teachers or headmaster. What image does that call up in your head? Then think of a parish like ours without a pastor. I know all of you become pastors at the same time. That's the picture we have when we talk about good shepherd or leadership. Somebody is put in charge for the sake of all, so that things may be organized. I wanted us to think of something else too. In these few years, there has been this broad discussion about the meaning of family. There has even been an attempt to redefine marriage. How about gay marriages? Who is qualified to receive communion? Someone in mortal sin or someone, everyone? Just make it available for everyone. And in all these things going on, the faithful have in somewhat been confused. They have listened and listened again, and some have asked questions. Where does the church stand? What is the Pope saying? What is the opinion of our bishops? What is church's teaching? I would say perhaps we have not been clear enough, or perhaps we have not done our work well. But one thing is pretty sure: the teaching of Christ has not changed. The teaching of the church has not changed. And therefore, in moments of confusion, in moments of uncertainty about the teachings of the church, we always have Christ to look unto. You always have the teachings of the apostles to consult with. You can go into the history of the church. You will always find an answer, because Christ promised to lead his flock to the end of time. Nothing shall prevail against the flock of Christ. And therefore, we are called to look at something else, ourselves. Because when we think of the shepherd, we think of bishops, we think of priests, we think of the Pope. That makes us begin to look very far away at the sin of others without looking at our own sins. And when we see the fault of others without seeing our own, we are distracted from ourselves. Everyone who is in charge of a certain group is a shepherd. In the three examples I gave you, if you are a parent, you have your children. You are the first teachers. You are their shepherd. Are you doing your work well, faithfully? Can you be proud to define yourself as good shepherd for my family? If you are a teacher, how does your classroom look like? And how are the students performing? Are you proud enough to claim credit because you have shepherded the students well? Or you are the head of the school? You can make these deductions and you find where you are. Bad leaders are bad shepherds because they use the authority given them over others to spruce up their images. It does not make whether the sheep is skinned or shaved. They want their personal interest, their own standing to look better. That's how we make bad shepherds. That's what King Zedekiah did, and that's what King Jehoiakim did. When they began to pursue wealth out of the sweat of the poor people, they misled the people, and that brought their own end because God sought account of the people entrusted to them. And therefore, looking at the work of the shepherd, each of us is entrusted with a certain responsibility with some group of people under us. How well are we doing our work? And then, how well are we good sheep? In some cases, we find that the leaders can lead, but then you also find that the followers are bad followers. And that's where we have a problem. Each of us is called to be a good shepherd. Let us do our part so that the flock of God will have good leaders, good flock, and we will come to that peace and justice which all of us aspire. Remember, say your rosary today and always.